After over a half-century playing and being established in New York, in the midst of New York baseball's golden age, the Dodgers joined the Giants in a controversial and risky move to the West Coast that upset many and changed the landscape of baseball. So let's look at the controversial and league-altering move to the West Coast.
Totally sports-esque. Major League.
New York City was the capital of baseball through the 1950s, with 3 teams competing for the World Series just about every year. But it goes back well before that for the 3 teams and New York City. Both the Dodgers and Giants being established in 1883, the Dodgers originally going by the Grays and changing their name numerous times, while the Giants were originally called the Gothams before going by the Giants starting in 1885. Then 20 years after those two were established, came the New York Highlanders, who of course would change their name to the Yankees. Their first year coming in the first year of the World Series in 1903, and in the beginning of this era, the Giants were the best NL team, winning 10 pennants in the first 21 years and winning 3 World Series, while refusing to participate in the 1904 series. And as their dominance would come to an end, Babe Ruth went to the Yankees, and they replaced the Red Sox as the best team in the American League, and they would go on to establish themselves as the best team in the league. Meanwhile, the Dodgers had a few good years, but for much of the first half of the century, they were uncompetitive, fans even giving them the nickname of Dem Bums. Despite this, Brooklyn had a real attachment to the team, just like fans of the Giants and the Yankees did, with the Polo Grounds, Amidst Field, and Yankee Stadium all becoming iconic venues of baseball and the city. And it was all at its best during the 40s and 50s. The Dodgers finally became competitive, winning 3 pennants in the 40s, then competing with their crosstown rivals in the Giants for pennants in the early 50s, with their most famous battle coming in 1951, when the Giants erased a 10-game deficit in August, culminating in the tiebreaker game that ended with Bobby Thompson's shot heard around the world. But in the end, the Giants had a similar fate as the Dodgers, as they would lose the World Series to the Yankees. From 1941 to 1953, the Dodgers won the pennant 5 times, and each time, they would lose to the Yankees, the Giants winning their last title and pennant in New York in 1954 with a sweep over the Cleveland Indians. Then 1 year after that, the Dodgers and Yankees met for the 6th time, and the Dodgers finally beat them, prompting massive celebration amongst fans, whose motto was wait till next year for the past 50 years. And from 1947 to 1958, every World Series except in 1948 featured one of those 3 teams, with 7 of those series featuring either the Dodgers or the Giants facing the Yankees. With contending teams every year, and some of the best players of all time on each team playing at the same time, New York was definitely a place to be for baseball fans, and all would assume it would stay that way. That is, until the side of baseball that fans don't really have a say in had new ideas. While the Giants were competitive in the early 50s, the previous decade was a different story, as they did not finish better than third in the NL once, as attendance at the Polo Grounds would drastically decline, and of course that led to less revenue. More New Yorkers were moving to the outer boroughs, and the Polo Grounds itself was in decline, going decades without renovations, and they were hit even harder when the New York Football Giants, who played at the Polo Grounds since 1925, decided to start playing at Yankee Stadium. The declining revenue hit their owner Horace Stoneham hard, as unlike other owners, this was his only source of income. City officials looked to claim the land for public housing, and Stoneham began to look elsewhere out of sheer economic necessity, as he put it. He originally considered becoming tenants of the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. Ironically, the Yankees were tenants of the Giants at the Polo Grounds from 1913 to 1922. But Stoneham eyed what he thought was a better location in Minnesota. The Braves had great success in moving from Boston to Milwaukee, and Stoneham had similar visions. He intended to set up shop at Metropolitan Stadium in Bloomington, Minnesota, which had been constructed for the Giants AAA team of the Minneapolis Millers. But moving a franchise to another city is not too easy. But what would make it easier is having another team with them to help balance things out. And there was another owner across town that had similar intentions. That man was Walter O'Malley, the owner of the Dodgers since 1950. The Brooklyn Dodgers finished first or second in every season under his ownership. And unlike the Giants, they were doing well financially. From 1952 to 56, the Dodgers were the only team in the NL to actually make money, aided by them finally getting over the hump to win a World Series. But Walter O'Malley wanted more. Specifically, he wanted a new stadium. Just like the Polo Grounds, Amidst Field was beloved, but it appeared past its time. It was small, lacked renovations, and with these things called cars appearing to be the future transportation in the city, Amidst Field was not well set up for parking, which in part hurt attendance even with a competing team. And O'Malley's idea, that he had been fighting city officials with for a decade, was building a new stadium, a very ambitious one, reminiscent of the Astrodome before the Astrodome was even a thought. He wanted to build a 55,000-seat dome stadium, featuring a fully automated ticketing system and a movie theater, because why not? Inviting Buckminster Fuller to design the structure, as he would also later help in designing the Astrodome. But while he had the finances to build the stadium, he did not have the finances to buy the land. So he went to Robert Moses for help. an urban planner who was often regarded as maybe the most powerful person in New York City. Moses wanted the Dodgers to move to Queens and play where the Mets currently play, and after a decade of back and forth, with little going anywhere, O'Malley looked elsewhere. And elsewhere was a booming city without any allegiances to her previous team, with hundreds of acres of land ready to offer, that being Los Angeles. O'Malley would then buy the Cubs minor league team, called the Los Angeles Angels, along with their stadium, Wrigley Field, doing all this in 1956. And during spring training, Norris Paulson, the mayor of Los Angeles, went to the Dodgers spring training camp in Florida in an attempt to lure the franchise. In the midst of this, O'Malley told Stoneham about his plans to move their team to Los Angeles, and he suggested that he contact George Christopher, the mayor of San Francisco, so they could also move to the West Coast and keep their long-standing bitter rivalry. He would then abandon his plans for moving to Minnesota and permanently shifted his focus to moving to San Francisco. O'Malley met one last time with Moses to discuss final offers, and again, it would not result in anything. And after a last-ditch effort made by Nelson Rockefeller, amidst intense protests from fans and team success, O'Malley would go through with his plans to move the Dodgers from Brooklyn to Los Angeles, and Stoneham and the Giants would be joining them in California when National League owners voted to approve the move in May of 1957. And during the entire process, and especially after it became official, both Stoneham and O'Malley were vilified. Stoneham decided to make the official announcement in late August that they were heading to San Francisco, leading to a farewell tour that was short, with the Giants' final game at the Polo Grounds on September 29, 1957, with numerous former Giants amongst the 11,000 fans in attendance who looked as if they were attending a funeral, giving Willie Mays a huge standing ovation in his final at-bat and caring little about the fact that they lost 9-1 to the Pirates. And once the final out was made, the players sprinted to the clubhouse in center field as angry fans rushed the field, taking bases, the pitching rubber, demolishing the bullpen shelter, tearing pieces of rubber off the outfield fence, while a few people pry the bronze plaque of Eddie Grant's monument in center field, though it would be recovered by police. And as the players ran to the clubhouse, one fan was overheard saying, "That's the only time I've seen them guys run hard all year. Let them run right on to San Francisco." Except for Willie. Horace Stoneham couldn't even bring himself to attend the game, and at one point during the postgame, fans chanted, "We want Stoneham," with a rope around his neck. Obviously a sad ending to where a historic franchise got its start. And the same sentiment was felt amongst fans in Brooklyn, who had an attachment to their team few cities have. As negotiations were still going on in April of that year, thousands of fans, young and old, protested in front of Borough Hall. But of course, their actions did not change what seemed bound to happen. The Pirates also played the Dodgers in their final game in Brooklyn, and fans hadn't officially been told they were leaving yet, but people already knew, leading to a depressing final game with an atmosphere like a funeral. That last game was cold, and with the Dodgers out of the pennant race, and fans wanting to avoid the dread, only 6,000 people showed up to the game. The organist played sad music throughout the game, as the Dodgers won the game, with fans not invading the field, as the grounds crew prepared as if they were playing another game the next day, with the official announcement coming a few weeks later. Amidst Field being demolished 3 years later, using a wrecking ball painted like a baseball, as a few hundred diehard fans looked on. Fans of both the Giants and Dodgers never got over what happened to their teams, with 2 New York writers creating their list of the 3 worst people of the 20th century, being Hitler, Stalin, and Walter O'Malley. While O'Malley deserves a lot of the blame, you can arguably say Robert Moses deserves more of the blame, as he blocked the sale of the necessary land. Moses is becoming a controversial figure over time in New York City, with the situation not helping his legacy. There also lies a difference between O'Malley and Stoneham in their situations, with the condition of the Polo Grounds and the Giants' attendance dropping with less revenue. However, for Walter O'Malley, he had a profitable team with a fan base that was still showing up, along with having the resources to stay in the city. Both Robert Moses and Walter O'Malley's desire for even greater riches, no amount of fan protest is going to deny him. But none of this could have happened without Stoneham and the Giants joining them. The move out west was one that immediately changed the league forever. When they moved out west, the closest NL team was the St. Louis Cardinals, who were 1,600 miles away. Obviously, there needed to be at least 2 teams for all of this to work. And another important thing that made this work were these things called airplanes. After World War II, airline travel became routine for teams, allowing for teams to travel as far west as California while keeping the same busy schedule. And these 2 teams being close would at least reduce travel costs some. And these 2 teams also didn't have an established location for where they would play. So for the Giants, they would play at Seal Stadium, the stadium of the AAA Red Sox team since 1931, while the Dodgers would be playing at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, a huge iconic venue meant for football and track and field. The dimensions called for a 250-foot left field, later having to put a 40-foot screen in left field to make it harder to hit home runs. And after all the drama, these 2 played their first game in California on April 15, 1950 in Seal Stadium, in which the Giants won 8-0. Then 3 days later, They played the first game at Memorial Coliseum in front of 78,000 people, a difference of 55,000 from the first game at Seal Stadium, as the Dodgers won 6-5. And while these two played at a temporary stadium, the next phase of controversy surrounding O'Malley's move came about in his pursuit to build his dream stadium on the other side of the country. Amidst the talks of moving to Los Angeles, the city proposed to Walter O'Malley a plot of land not part or even close to Chavez Ravine be used to build a stadium. O'Malley declined the original offer, but after seeing Chavez Ravine from the air, he expressed an interest in building the stadium there. Prior to the announcement of their move, Chavez Ravine was still reserved for public purposes, with the area largely being an independent rural Mexican-American community in LA for the first half of the 20th century. By the 1950s, many of the residents moved there because of ethnic housing discrimination within Los Angeles, but many were still doing well, with many owning their own homes. But in 1951, the Los Angeles Housing Authority began acquiring land through voluntary purchase and eminent domain, with plans to build public housing. But as Norris Poulsen came into office, the Elysian Park Heights Development Project, as it was called, was cancelled, with Chavez Ravine becoming unused and almost vacant in the coming years, aside from the original residents. And with Chavez Ravine being reserved for public purposes, the proposal for the area to be used for a stadium received a ton of backlash, many believing that a pro baseball team did not constitute public use, with other officials calling for a zoo to be established in its place. Either way, the city council approved the transfer of the land to the Dodgers, prompting the process to be halted by a successful petition establishing a need for a public vote to decide if the Dodgers could obtain the land. But the referendum fell short by 25,000 votes. And by 1959, the last residents of Chavez Ravine, who stayed until the end, were forcibly removed, and the construction of Dodger Stadium began. And 2 years after the Giants began play at Candlestick Park, the Dodgers began play at Dodger Stadium in 1962, where they still play. And by this time, it was firmly established that baseball in the West was here to stay. Adding salt to the wound of the fans hurt by these moves were a huge success. Even playing in a small park initially, the Giants drew over 1 million fans in their first 2 years, and that continued as they moved into a new stadium and became competitive in the 60s. The same was true with the Dodgers, who already had little problem with attendance and only added more with a bigger stadium. And the success they had in Brooklyn continued into Los Angeles, the difference being that they had better success in the World Series. In just their second season in Los Angeles, they did what the Brooklyn Dodgers did just once, which was win the World Series over the White Sox. They appeared again 4 years later, and this time they not only won another World Series, but they would beat the Yankees, a dilemma for fans in Brooklyn. They won another title in '65 before losing the next year. Watching players like Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale become legends in Los Angeles after their brief time in Brooklyn, while watching Brooklyn greats like Duke Snider, Gil Hodges, Johnny Padres, and Jim Gilliam win titles and thrive on the other side of the country. And on a larger scale, the success was huge for baseball. As the population was moving further west, MLB quickly responded with expansion. In 1961, the third California team was introduced into Los Angeles Angels, as they were originally called. Then that same year, the Washington Senators did what the Giants originally planned to do by moving to Minnesota. Then to balance things, 2 NL teams were introduced the next year, with Texas getting their first team and the Houston Colt 45s, of course later becoming the Astros. And another big development caused by the moves was the other team introduced in 1962 in the New York Mets. Merging the colors of the Dodgers and Giants, New York got a new team who played where the Dodgers were supposed to move, playing in Queens at Shea Stadium, easing some of the pain from former Giants and Dodgers fans who became Mets fans who were already used to some disappointment. And change and expansion in baseball snowballed from there. At the end of the 60s, there were 6 teams on the West Coast, with the San Diego Padres, the short-lived Seattle Pilots, and the Kansas City Athletics moving to Oakland. Canada also getting a team that year in the Expos, along with Kansas City getting the Royals in return, with 6 more expansion teams being introduced in the years after, including the Seattle Mariners, who would take place of the Pilots. So in the end, 2 cornerstone franchises moving west amidst the golden age of New York baseball was a massive success for both the teams and the entire league. With new technology and a shift in location, it allowed for it to become possible. But in order to have that success, owners had to take teams from passionate fans while dealing with politics and all the controversy that comes with building a stadium. Expansion into the West and the South in MLB was bound to happen, but it's interesting to consider what may have been if it didn't involve 2 rivals in the same city moving away from where it all started. The Giants were in a tough state and appeared bound to move away from New York, but the Dodgers had a real opportunity to stay in the same city and become what the Mets are today. But outside forces and a desire for more led to these 2 moving to California, with the success of the moves leading to the current state of Major League Baseball. It was a huge risk that paid off amidst massive controversy that led to a reality where a New York slugger was able to showcase their power on the West Coast. Hopefully you like this video, and if so, please consider liking and subscribing for new videos every week. Thank you.